You're trying to sleep and something pulls on your pyjamas. If you wear pyjamas, otherwise it'll pull on something else. But either way, disturbing stuff. Tonight's ghost story is called The Thing Beside My Bed, and it's another brilliant story from Jacqueline, so thank you, Jacqueline, for sending it to us. Now, this is the same house that she's been telling us about, the spooky one, and she says, one night I was drifting off to sleep when I heard my bedroom door slowly creak open. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was the cat coming in for a cuddle. Then I felt my bedclothes slowly being pulled off of my body. Whoa! She says at that point I'd had enough. I spun round and shouted into the empty room, telling whatever it was to leave me alone. After that, the pulling stopped and nothing else happened at night. Another evening we were all sitting in the living room watching TV when we saw what looked like car headlights coming up the drive. The house was sat at the end of the road, so anyone driving up would only be coming to the house. We went outside to see who had arrived. There was nobody there. No car, nothing. Later we learned from some older farm workers that the son of the original owner had hanged himself at the top of the stairs. Many of us wondered if this was the presence still lingering in this house. Now, if that is the case, that's obviously very sad. However, I still do not condone pulling clothes off of a woman, even in death. Okay, consent is very important. If someone's trying to get you butt naked at night and it was in fact a ghost, thank you. I would like you to email me, thedarkcleanchronicles25@gmail.com, or send me your story. I'm on TikTok and Instagram, and I cannot wait to speak to you. I'll catch you next time for some more ghost tea.
Before I tell you guys this story, I do want to warn you, it does mention the passing of a pet. I'm not going to tell you how it happened because it's rather gruesome, but if that bothers you, please skip this video. Now, when it comes to supernatural things in the Appalachian Mountains, this is one of the most messed up and saddest that I have ever heard happening, but it does happen because it's a trick, and it's you know, we're just going to talk about it. I'm going to tell you the story. So this story actually comes from Abby. We read one of her stories earlier this week, and this is a second one that she sent in. And while the last one only occurred once, this one occurs constantly, and it's even sadder. It makes it even sadder that it keeps happening. Abby had a kitten that passed away from something horrific involving her friend, and that friend let out a very particular shriek when it happened. Well, now something is consistently mimicking that shriek outside. And every time Abby hears it, she has to relive what happened to her kitten. And it keeps happening over and over and over. And it's not just her that'll hear it, it's anyone with her. And I just think that is so messed up. But that is what these things do, because it's getting your attention. And I don't like it.
How would you feel if you literally had to run for your life from a mimic? That is exactly what happened to this person. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into today's story. In my country, I actually appeared in the news because of this incident. This happened in July of 2019, before the COVID pandemic started. Two of my friends and I really wanted to travel to the north of Portugal. We live in the capital of the country, Lisbon, and in the north there is a place called Gerês, a natural park where people can camp. Instead of tents, we rented small bungalows because we don't really like sleeping in tents. Everything was going well. One of my friends, Sophia, is a very good driver and very down-to-earth when it comes to supernatural things. My other friend, Carla, loves this type of thing. She even dresses a bit like a witch and is fascinated by anything supernatural. We arrived by car and everything was beautiful. The smell of the forest in the morning, with the mist still slowly disappearing, was amazing. We went to the reception to get the key to our bungalow and walked to it. It was about a 10-minute walk from the reception. There were 3 bungalows in that area. In one of them, there were people around our age, maybe 25. They looked like a couple, and they had a dog, a Portuguese water dog, which in the US is known as the dog the Obamas had. In the other bungalow, there was an older couple around 65 years old. They looked like a very sweet pair. We went to the supermarket to buy food, and when we came back, the area was full of sounds from birds and animals. It was beautiful. Night started to fall, but we felt safe because there were cameras outside the bungalows. My friend Sophia went to sleep because she was tired from the long drive. Carla and I stayed watching TV, and later we decided to go outside in front of the bungalow just to breathe the incredibly pure air. We did this for several days. We walked through the forest and enjoyed nature. On the 4th day, we did the same thing again, but this time the 3 of us went outside together. It was around 10 p.m. when we suddenly heard a scream. It was the girl from the bungalow next door shouting to her boyfriend not to go because it might just be an animal. When he opened the door, he looked at us and asked, "Can you hear that scream too?" We said yes. He said he would go to reception in case someone needed help. My friend Carla, who loves night walks and mysterious things, said she would go with him. So the rest of us stayed in our bungalow with the girl and her dog waiting outside. About 10 minutes later, the boyfriend came back and said the woman at reception told him it might be an animal, but that there was a flashlight somewhere down the path. He said he was going to check it out, and we all decided to go together. I thought it was strange that Carla had stayed at reception because she normally loves this kind of thing. We walked for about 5 minutes until we reached a flashlight lying on the ground, turned on. When I looked at my friend Sophia's face, that's when I felt it. There were no sounds. No birds, no insects, nothing. Only the wind. I had a bad feeling and said we should go back, but the boyfriend kept insisting we go help whoever might be out there. When I got angry and said we were going back, he suddenly started laughing at us. That's when I noticed something disturbing. He had one single tooth in the front that was very yellow, while the rest were white. At that moment, the girl's dog started barking aggressively at him. He turned to us and said that going back wouldn't matter because he would always know where we were. Every hair on my body stood up. I knew something about this wasn't normal. I screamed at the girls to run. We all ran back to the bungalow. I didn't look back, but I felt like he was behind me. We got close to the bungalow lights. I started shouting for him to not come any closer. He just stood near the forest laughing. Then suddenly we saw 2 flashlights coming down the road. It was Carla and the girl's boyfriend returning from reception asking what was happening. I immediately shouted for them to come inside the bungalow, and when I looked, the thing was not there anymore, and we told them everything that happened. Right away, Carla said, "You found a mimic." I had never even heard that in my life. None of us slept that night. We all stayed together in our bungalow. At 6 in the morning, since I hadn't slept at all, we went to reception and asked them to call the police. Later, the police showed us the security footage from the cameras. They said there was nobody there. But in the video, you can see me screaming at nothing and pointing to someone in front of the bungalow like I was a crazy person. After that, we decided to leave, and the couple, who had now become our friends, also decided to leave. While we were packing our things into the car, the police said they still wanted to talk to us later. We exchanged contacts with the couple. As we were leaving, the elderly couple from the 3rd bungalow came outside. They asked if we were leaving. I said yes and asked if they had heard us screaming during the night. The woman said no, that they slept very heavily. When I said goodbye to her, she smiled at me, and again every hair on my body stood up, because she had the exact same smile and the same yellow tooth. I immediately turned away and told my friends in the car. They said that when we got home, we should call the detective. 2 weeks later, the detective called me. He told me that the 3rd bungalow had never been used for guests. It was only used to store construction materials. So it was impossible for an elderly couple to have stayed there. To this day, the police never gave us the video footage we asked for many times, the footage where we hoped to see the elderly couple, and I still live today without knowing what really happened. Thank you for reading my story. Y'all, that plot twist! Thank you to this person for sending me their story. Send me your scary story at lizlunacysubmissions@gmail.com. This one was really fun to read. Thank you for watching this episode of Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!
My son's imaginary friend was real. Hey there, welcome back to Pink Hair Ain't Scared. I'm Marge, your spooky drag storyteller. Let's dive in to another scary story. When my son was 2 years old, he started acting as if he was interacting with something or someone that his father and I could never see, like throwing toys down the hallway and then running away murmuring words. When I asked what he was doing, he always told me he was giving toys to the boy for him to play with. There was never anybody there, but it was always icy cold down that hallway and leading into the garage. I'd asked him what the boy's name was, and he would tell me Don was his name. I asked what the boy was doing. Waiting for his mom to pick him up, he would always reply. We put it down to an imaginary friend and nothing more. Harmless, we thought, until he started waking up in the middle of the night, screaming, "Don won't let me sleep. He keeps tickling my toes." This sent chills down my spine, and so my son would sleep in the bed with me every night. This continued for another 6 months, until the real estate notified us that the owner of the house had died and his children would be selling the property and splitting the profit between them, meaning we had to move. After we left, I came across a local news article about the owner of our old rental, stating how much he will be missed by the community. He had been raised by his mother in the house we were renting since he was a child. Then I noticed his name, and everything came flooding back to me. His name was Don. My son's imaginary friend was our homeowner. He must have been waiting for his mother to come and take him to the other side. I'll never look at imaginary friends the same. Do you have a scary story you'd like to send in? My email is down below. Hope to hear from you soon, and stay tuned for another scary story.
Welcome back, roomies. In today's story, a woman vanishes from a bed and breakfast, but leaves behind a warning. But first, a disclaimer. This story is presented as a hotel horror story and was submitted by a follower. I cannot verify the authenticity of events described. So now let's begin. A woman arrived carrying an orange tabby cat in a travel carrier. She looked exhausted, pale, shaky, and constantly glancing over her shoulder, as if someone had followed her there. Normally, the bed and breakfast didn't accept walk-in guests. Reservations were usually booked days or even weeks in advance. But that night, by pure chance, one room had just become available after a last-minute cancellation. When asked how many nights she planned to stay, the woman hesitated, then quietly said, just until morning. She requested a room far away from the other guests. The owner assigned her room 14 at the end of the upstairs hallway. Security cameras later captured something strange. The woman entered room 14 shortly after checking in. She was never seen coming back out, yet at exactly 4:17 a.m., the front door alarm chimed, signaling that someone had entered or exited the building. When the owner checked the footage, the door had clearly opened, but no one was there. The next morning, breakfast came and went. The woman never appeared. Concerned, the owner unlocked room 14. The bed looked untouched. The bathroom was completely dry. Her suitcase was gone, but from inside the closet came a scratching sound. When the owner opened the door, the orange tabby cat sat perfectly still inside its carrier, staring inside the far corner of the room. Taped to the top of the carrier was a handwritten note. It read, "Please don't let him out after dark. He watches the door." The woman was nowhere to be found. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Police were contacted, and according to the owner, investigators later discovered that the identification used at check-in belonged to a woman who had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. The cat remained at the bed and breakfast while authorities investigated, but then strange things started happening. Every night at exactly 4:17 a.m., the cat would suddenly freeze. Its ears would flatten. It would stare directly down the hallway toward room 14 and begin hissing at nothing. Guests staying nearby reported hearing knocks on their doors. 3 slow knocks, always 3. When they opened their doors, no one was there. Some guests even claimed that they heard soft footsteps retreating down the hallway moments afterward. Eventually, the owner was able to adopt the cat. Years later, the cat still stays with them around the property. And every night, without fail, it sits outside room 14, staring at the doorknob, waiting, as if someone is standing on the other side, as if someone is trying to come back. So would you open the door if you heard 3 knocks at 4:17 a.m.?
What if someone is watching you right now? If you are about to travel or are currently traveling, especially if you're alone, please scroll on past this video if you get paranoid easily, but this video could save your life. This video is going to be talking about vacationers that have recently found hidden cameras in their Airbnbs and rental properties while they and their families thought they were safely enjoying a peaceful vacation getaway. The stories I'm about to talk about have all happened in the last couple years. It's truly horrifying when you think about the amount of people who go missing or disappear while on vacation. This could be an explanation of why. Are people being targeted the second they check in? This year, 2026, in Oakhurst, California, a 44-year-old man was actually arrested for doing something insanely hideous and sick. His name was Christian Edwards, and he had this 3-story rental property available on Airbnb. People would come for these big family gatherings and these just nice, peaceful getaways, and police were mortified when they found out that he had more than 4,000 images and videos of people caught in intimate moments, using the bathroom, changing clothes, etc. This was men, women, children, all ages that were caught in these images and videos. And the creepiest part is that police and investigators say when they mostly deal with these cases, it's hidden cameras in the house that are capturing these images, but not this time. These were like home video style pictures and videos, because he had actually made secret compartments all throughout this house. And he was actually living on the property unbeknownst to the guests that were staying there. He was in the walls, he was in the ceilings, he was under the floors. He had little pinholes everywhere where he could spy through. He had cracks that were, strategically placed. He had fake vents set up, like air conditioned vent covers set up, so he could watch through those. He knew this place inside and out and would creep around quite literally in the walls. And what creeps me out is, like, me and my wife and my daughter have stayed at different Airbnbs, and we've even joked around, like, did you hear that funny noise? Like, what if somebody's in the walls right now? Or what if somebody's here? We stayed in this one place in Alabama, and there was actually a whole section of the house that was locked off. And we always wondered, was that guy living in there? And maybe he wasn't doing anything nefarious, but you're not supposed to be on the property unless it's a clear divided home, according to Airbnb's rules. So there was, I believe that somebody was in the house that we stayed in Alabama that was on the other side of this locked door, because it was too much of the house to be locked off. Like, it wasn't just like a room, it was a huge section of the house. When you rent an Airbnb, kind of be mindful of that and kind of trust your gut. If you hear a weird noise, go looking around, go do some investigations. There's some tools that you can buy online that will detect cameras and videos. So those tools are insanely helpful. You can actually see people scanning outlets, smoke detectors, any kind of weird little hole in the wall, and it can actually detect if there is some kind of electronic device in that area. One was a 43-year-old man named Patrick Cius, and if you're noticing a pattern, it's because almost all of these people are middle-aged white men that are caught being these creeps. So Patrick Cius actually had cameras hidden in the plug-in outlets, so like where you plug in your cell phone chargers and everything. He actually had secret cameras in some of those, and they were aimed specifically at toilets, showers, and beds. So he had these cameras strategically placed to catch the biggest chance of you, being unclothed or, getting undressed or getting dressed. And I just couldn't help but wonder, are me or you on the black web somewhere just fulfilling someone's poop fetish? Because that's what these things are for. A lot of times they're not using them for their own sick pleasure. They are, but they're also profiting off of them, selling them on the dark web. So I can't help but wonder if people like me and you are in someone's portfolio right now, getting sold across the world to somebody that wanted to see me take a dump. And that has to be one sick individual. Like, I can't imagine wanting to see me take a dump with my busted can of biscuits belly when I sit down on the toilet. But that's what these things are essentially being used for when you get down to the root cause of it. And it's truly just sick and disgusting. But the point that I'm trying to make with these videos are, these people that have these cameras set up, are they doing more than just getting cameras, set up for images and videos? Are they trying to check out who's alone? Like, is there any single solo women traveling? Is there any really young adults, somebody who's like 18, 19 years old traveling? Like, are they doing this to see who they could possibly take a step further and get into human trafficking? Because they would have all the perfect alibis. Their DNA would be suspected to be found in the house because they own it. They live there part of the year. They clean it. They come there. So that would be an alibi there. They would know the property. It wouldn't be uncommon to see them coming and going on the property. They would have a ton of excuses to be around those places. And you're the one that's in an unknown area traveling alone. Maybe you just got lost or confused, or somebody else kidnapped you in an unfamiliar area. So is that what the main goal of some of these creeps are? Is they're trying to figure out who's easy targets and who's not? Of course, Airbnb has permanently banned both of these individuals from the platform. I would hope so. But the next one is super creepy, and Airbnb and the individual are actually getting sued over this case. Now, no suspects have been named, but this happened in Scottsdale, Arizona, where a husband and wife and their kids were actually on vacation. And the husband, who was a firefighter, him and his wife were laying in bed, and he was looking at the smoke detector, and he was thinking, this is a weird place for a smoke detector in the bedroom right above the bed. And also, that smoke detector doesn't look quite right. So in the middle of the night, he gets up, he takes the smoke detector apart, and he finds a camera in there. And not only does he find a camera, he finds an SD card. And on that SD card, they found thousands of images of multiple different people over the past few years. Now, the dates were on the SD card, so he can see that this camera had been up for at least a few years. He turns it over to police and investigators. But here's the problem. Because him and his family were not photographed or videoed, no one knows why they weren't photographed or videoed, but they weren't. They actually could not technically press the charges against the homeowner of this Airbnb because they weren't wronged. So the people that were wronged would have to press the charges. So the police are trying to identify those individuals. To me, this is a very simple cause of how you would identify them. Is like Airbnb has your information of when you booked it. You can cross-reference that with the dates on the SD card. There you go. So I don't know what the delay is here. This has been almost a year now. This has been July. It was July 20th of last year. Why wasn't that guy or woman, whoever owns that Airbnb, why weren't they arrested? And it could be a thing where that property is owned under an incorporation because, unfortunately, tons of these corporations buy up a lot of these properties and then, rent them out to individuals. There's also a chance that the camera was left by another guest that periodically maybe rents the place and comes back to check his camera, because that would also be another pretty smart way to do things. Because the homeowner is obviously going to mostly get the blame, but you're actually the creep and you're just coming back every, maybe you come back once a year, every 6 months or whatever, and you have an excuse of why you're going through there, and you take the smoke detector down and get your SD card out that nobody knows about, and that's your little kick. So no one knows why they have been not charged anybody, but the guy who found the camera is, like I said, civilly suing the property owner, and he's civilly suing Airbnb as well. Now, Airbnb has temporarily suspended that host, even though they're still unnamed. That's Airbnb's official statement, and the investigation is still apparently ongoing. Now, what makes this even worse is when you couple them with port cities or beach towns. Port cities and beach towns have a huge spiked increased rate of people going missing anyhow, especially people that are not from those areas. We're talking hot spots like Miami, New York, LA, Houston, Texas. Those hot spots like port cities, because people can get kidnapped and trafficked really easily. A lot of times before anyone even knows you're missing, they could already have you kidnapped on a boat and in international waters before anybody has even reported you missing 24 hours later. So these port cities, coupled with these Airbnb and rental properties with these hidden cameras, would be a perfect ruse for somebody to figure out who's traveling alone. Now, I'm going to talk about some cases here in a minute of this exact situation, but FBI's profilers really say that this is what they think happens in these beach towns, and this is why. And I'm only telling you all this because the perpetrators already know the information I'm about to tell you. I'm telling you this so you're better prepared and so you know not to put yourselves in these positions. Beaches are almost completely unsurveillanced. There is almost no cameras on beaches. And what I mean by that is most beachfront property, like if you go to Miami, you go to LA, most beachfront property is owned by hotels. Well, they have cameras on the hotel property, and they can see the first little glimpse of the beach. But when it gets dark outside, the beaches are pitch dark. Anybody who's walked the beach knows it's pitch dark. So the cameras really can't see out there in the darkness, especially like right where the water meets the sand. And there's essentially no police officers very rarely going up and down that area. They'll just comb it every once in a while. So FBI profilers believe that people stalk these areas looking for people who are drunk or vulnerable, or by themselves, or even in very, very small groups that they think they can overpower. So don't put yourself in these positions when you're in these dark blackout areas, away from surveillance, away from police, when you've had a little too much to drink and you're kind of staggering around in an area you're not that familiar with anyhow, because these creeps and these weirdos are already there. People in the comments always say, you're giving them ideas. I promise you, they already know. You just didn't think of this because you're not a weirdo. But the weirdos that are watching this video, they already know this information. It's very easy to find, especially if you're wanting to go through with it. So please just say, watch out for those dark areas. Know your surroundings. Try not to go alone. But unfortunately, in this first case we want to talk about, it didn't matter that they were alone or not, because 3 young women were all taken at the same time. So this actually happened in the Indiana dunes of Lake Michigan. You can look this case up. It is an older one, but it is one of the most chilling ones. 3 young women were on the dunes, which, if you guys haven't been to Lake Michigan, it's like the ocean. You can't see the other side of it. It is huge. They're walking the beach. Only one witness says that, hey, we saw them actually talking to a guy that was on a boat, and he was just a little bit out on the water, and we saw them kind of conversing back and forth with him. And then shortly after that was the last that anybody ever saw those three young women. And there's a bunch of theories, because their belongings were all found left in the sand about where that witness last saw them. So there is a theory that they didn't want to get their belongings wet. The guy was offering to take them on a quick boat ride. So, hey, leave your belongings, here on the beach, like your purse, your shoes. And this is what I don't find believable, is who would leave their wallet behind and come get in the boat and I'll drive you around. Now, the reason why they would have done this is because if he was out in the water, they'd have probably had to wade out there in the water, at least somewhat. So they didn't want to get their belongings wet. I'm not really buying that, but that's what investigators specifically think happened. The other theory is that the witness was actually the person who did something to them, and they were just saying that, hey, we saw them talking to a guy on a boat, as a way to, throw suspicion on a third party that may or may not even really exist. And the last theory is that maybe they all went swimming, maybe they all had a little bit to drink, and they got stuck in a riptide. The problem with that is their bodies have never been found. Their articles of clothing have never been found. The only thing that was ever found was their belongings they left in the sand on the beach, all right next to each other. That case has gone unsolved and unresolved for decades, with no new leads ever. And I could go on and on and on cases that have happened recently, like in the last few years, of people that have gone missing while visiting beaches with their families or friends. And they're almost all women. Okay. So I would say that you could say that a lot of these were probably drownings or shark attacks, etc. But when you look at how many of them are women, that's where I think it's pretty odd. It'd be one thing when I was reading these cases off, when I typed in the search engine of like cases that fit these categories, and I put in like categories of strange disappearances with, vacationing with family and all this stuff. You would think that if it was drowning, you would see a pretty even split, but you don't. It's like 90% women. So Panama City Beach, Nancy Mither, she's 66-year-old, retired school teacher from Kentucky. Her and her husband are going to Panama City Beach in Florida, which is in the Gulf, and they're all having fun. And the husband and wife, they're sitting out there watching the sunset. But the husband had a really bad sunburn, and I've been there. I've had sunburns that have made me sick before. And he was talking about how he'd had a really bad sunburn. He was feeling sick from it. He had a blinding headache. He just wanted to go back to the room and kind of relax. And she said, well, honey, you go ahead. I want to watch the sunset. And he said, okay. He went to the room and immediately fell asleep, which a lot of you all might not understand that. Me being extremely fair-skinned, I get really bad sunburns that, like, it doesn't matter how much sunscreen I put on. It will make me sick to my stomach. It will give me these blinding headaches that make me want to puke. And then all I want to do is go to sleep. Like, that is a real thing. Sun sickness is a real thing that some very, very, pale-skinned people deal with. And he was essentially in that situation. So he went back to the room. He fell asleep, took a nap for a couple hours. And when he woke up, he realized that his wife had not came back. Now, hotel surveillance does confirm this, that you can see them go on the beach together. The beach in Panama City Beach is extremely busy. So if he'd tried to drown her in the water or something, people would have saw, there's people everywhere. And the surveillance video sees him come back on his own. And the story is furthermore backed up by the fact that, one, he had an obvious sunburn, but two, other people that were at the beach actually caught her in the background of their photos by herself after the time he'd reported going back to the room, and the surveillance camera catches them going back to the room. So the story is corroborated by him, because a lot of people want to point fingers at the husband here. And Nancy was seen partly in the water. The beach is very busy, and that's the last we know of her, is a photograph. She's actually in the background of a photograph, partly in the water, and that's the last we ever see of Nancy. Her body and clothing were never found. Her belongings were still sitting there on the beach, and that's all we have ever seen of her. Now, there's tons of theories, because the Gulf is pretty riddled with sharks. And, I'm a big shark advocate. I don't want anybody to go out hunting sharks. The Gulf is full of sharks. I have been there in the Gulf. I've seen the sharks myself. There's a bunch of them. Anyhow, some people say that maybe she was shark attacked. If that's the case, you almost always find some part of the body if it was that close to the shore. Two, most people would have seen the shark attack probably happen, since that beach was very populated. The next theory is that she drowned. She got stuck in a rip current, or maybe she was drinking a little bit. She's an older lady. Maybe she drowned. Once again, it was a pretty busy beach. I feel like people should have saw her. She would have probably been screaming. Who knows? Maybe she stayed out there a little bit after dark and no one saw her. Maybe people had left. Maybe it was a shark attack a little bit after dark, because that is the prime time for sharking, is right at sundown. So who knows? Either way, these cases are like, you can just look them up and it's just bam, 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 one after another, one after another, one after another. And if it was the latter of a shark attack or a drowning, you would think we'd see more men in the mix, but there's very few men that go missing. And that brings us to our last case. So the last case is Tyler from North Carolina. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head, but his boat was found abandoned. It was just right off the shore. He was apparently like inland coast fishing, and his boat was found right on the shore. No one can figure out what happened to Tyler. He completely vanished. He's gone. They can't find his body. And some people say maybe it was a boating accident where he fell off the boat. He was a pretty strong swimmer, and those waters were not known to be choppy. But once again, shark attacks can happen. And the boat was drifting. It was not like a full throttle where maybe he fell off and it was like stuck in full throttle or something and the boat left him. It would have been slowly drifting. So even if he would have fallen off, he should have been able to get back in pretty easy. There's a ton of theories out there, but something that does happen time to time is people that go out on these little boats do get targeted by these people that are in their own little boat, because there's essentially no way to prevent crime from happening out on the water. I mean, when you're out on a boat in the ocean, whatever happens out there is between you and God, because nobody can get to you quick enough to help. Keep that in mind. There's a reason why you watch things like Dexter and stuff, and they take the business out there on the boats, because there's no surveillance out there, and there's very little that anybody can do or even wants to do out there when you're on your own. Hope you enjoyed tonight's video, and I hope you all safe travels. I don't want to scare anybody or fearmonger. I am simply trying to raise awareness to what can be around you, because so many people are ignorant to these situations and the dangers that can entail, solo traveling or traveling in small groups. You're not invincible. You're not untouchable. You hear about it happening on TV, but it can very well happen to you as well. Like it's not just some fairy tales that are out there. I don't tell these stories to fearmonger. I tell these stories to hopefully raise awareness. Because if you look at the missing people cases that go unsolved, every year the number is slightly growing. And until people are aware of their surroundings and do more to protect themselves or to be aware of the situations they're in, it's only going to keep going up. And you think these numbers would go down with the amount of technology that we have, but it's not. If you would like to follow for more true crime stories, conspiracy theories, weird alien stuff, what have you, follow the podcast. It's called Matt from Nomads on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's called Nomads Animal Reserve on YouTube.
Let's read another scary Reddit story. I grew up in an 1840s Victorian house in Massachusetts, and some things happened there that I still can't explain. I grew up in a huge Victorian house in Newton Upper Falls, Massachusetts, near the Charles River and Echo Bridge. The area around the bridge is a deep wooded gorge, and at night it gets incredibly quiet except for the river and the echoes under the bridge. The house was built in the 1840s by the owners of one of the local mills, back when that area was a busy mill village. The house was enormous, 7+ bedrooms spread across 3 floors, plus a turret room in the attic. There were servant staircases hidden inside the walls, and little doors that led to strange passages between parts of the house. As a kid, it felt like a place that had endless hidden spots. The attic was one of the weirdest parts. The crumbling walls were covered in signatures and notes from the kids who had lived there over the years. Names and dates going all the way back to the 1800s. Apparently, every generation of kids had gone up there and left messages. Behind the house, there was also an old carriage house that still had the original horse stalls and antique carriage from the 1800s. The basement was the part that always scared me the most, though. It had this huge unfinished stone foundation and always felt cold and damp. Even during the day, it felt unsettling down there. I avoided it whenever I could. Most of the strange things I had experienced actually happened on the 3rd floor, though, where my bedroom and bathroom were, and where I spent most of my time. The footsteps. I heard footsteps often growing up. I had 3 siblings and 2 dogs, so it was a busy house, and there was usually a logical explanation even if I looked around and didn't see anyone right away. But one night in high school, I was home alone and started hearing footsteps coming from the 3rd floor. They were slow, uneven footsteps, like someone walking from room to room. The problem was that I was the only one home. I remember just standing there listening. waiting for one of the dogs to react or for one of my siblings to come around the corner. But the house was completely quiet except for those footsteps. Eventually, I got so freaked out that I called the police because I thought someone had broken in. They came and searched the entire house and the basement. They didn't find anyone. Nothing was out of place. The music. Another strange thing that used to happen on the 3rd floor was when I showered. Whenever I was in the shower, I would hear what sounded like old music, like people singing on an old record. But it sounded warped, almost like a record stuck repeating on a loop over and over. The weird part was that I only ever heard it while I was showering. The second I turned the water off, the music would stop. The woman. Another night in high school, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a woman sitting on the edge of my bed. She was just sitting there, completely still. She blinked at me a couple of times, and a shiver went down my spine. For a second, I thought I must still be dreaming. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, and she was gone. But I had a Tempur-Pedic mattress, and the spot where she had been sitting was still slowly rising back up the way memory foam does after someone gets up. That part still freaks me out. The next day, my mom was cleaning out the rafters in the carriage house and found a dusty portrait that had clearly been stored up there for a long time. When she brought it inside and showed it to me, my stomach dropped. It was the woman I had seen sitting on the edge of my bed. The carriage house. The carriage house itself was already creepy. It still had the horse stalls with the horses' names on little plaques, an old carriage from the 1800s, and we even had found bones in there before. The whole place always smelled like old wood and dust, and the light inside was dim even during the day. The building was built on a hill, so the back of the carriage house was opened into what was basically a basement level underground. That lower level had these strange trap doors in the floor that led down into an even smaller basement space, along with some hidden passageways. The main door down there had been nailed shut, but the trap doors could still be opened. Even during the day, it felt like the kind of place you didn't want to spend too much time in. One night in high school, my best friend and I had been out drinking, and a couple guys dropped us off near the carriage house. When we got out of the car, we both looked up at the same time. In the window of the carriage house, we saw what looked like a woman's face looking out at us. One hand was up against the glass next to her face. She wasn't moving, just staring out. My friend immediately started yelling because she thought it was her mom following us. Her mom was extremely strict and honestly the kind of person who might actually do something like that. She started shouting, "Mom, what is wrong with you? Why are you following me?" We ran over to the carriage house to confront her, but when we got there, the face was gone. Nobody was inside. The only thing on the window was a single handprint in the dust, exactly where we had seen the hand. My friend even called her mom right there because she was so convinced it had been her. Her mom was home. To this day, I have no explanation for any of it, but growing up in that house, it never really felt like we were the only ones there. I still think about that portrait sometimes.
Tell me, what's the creepiest experience you ever had in your life and why you still think about that moment?
So this was my very last day of college. I had just finished my last final. And I was on the interstate back home to my house, and my car started overheating. It started smoking up, going crazy. So I pulled over off the side of the interstate, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know anything about cars, but I had popped the hood and I was trying to investigate what was going on. And a few minutes later, some guy pulls up behind me off on the E lane, walks up to me, asks what's going on with the car, and he mentioned it looks like it's overheating. And then he offers to the nearest gas station to pick up a couple jugs of water so we could come back to the car and cool the car down. So I get in the car and we're riding for, a minute or two. And I happen to look in the back seat and I see two shotguns laying on the back seat of his car. And I'm instantly like, what did I get myself into? Like, you gotta be kidding. I can't go out like this. I haven't even got my degree yet. I haven't graduated yet. I can't go out like this. And then he mentions he's on his way to go on a hunting trip. And I was thinking, okay. But it was a little odd because we're in a Honda Accord. Like, usually people go hunting in trucks, but we were in a 4-door sedan. And so now I'm on edge a little bit, and we get down the road a little more, and then the dude reaches out from the side of his door and pulls out a Tupperware container, and he's got 2 pre-made hot dogs in that container. And then he offers me one, and I'm like, nah, I'm not about to eat a hot dog from a stranger. That's crazy to offer, matter of fact. And at this point, I'm completely freaked out. I'm like, why did I just get in the car with this guy? So we make it to the gas station. We get the 2 jugs of water. We go back to the car. I pour the water into the car gets cooled off, and I get it back up and running. And the guy offers to follow me home to make sure I get back to my house all right. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not about to let this dude know where I live. But he's like, no, I insist. He like insisted on following me. So we get on the interstate, and I'm thinking to myself, as soon as we get some space in between us on the road, I'm taking the first exit. So we get on the road. I change lanes. He doesn't change lanes. And so at this point, we've created a little space between us, and he's ahead of me on the interstate. And as soon as he's ahead of me, I take the first exit and dip and end up making it home. Now, the guy could have been harmless. He could have just been a good Samaritan, but I wasn't about to take any chances. He also could have been a serial killer, but that was a weird interaction. It still gives me the creeps every time I think about it.
Get ready with me while I tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. This happened when I was 5 months pregnant. And up until that point, nothing unusual had ever happened in my home. It was a regular happy home, just me, my boyfriend, and my sons living a normal life. That's how it always starts. Then one random decision changed everything for us. I live in New Orleans, where it's pretty common to see people selling all kinds of things on the street. Crystals, herbs, candles, oils, and bundles of sage. One afternoon, I was walking by when a man was selling sage bundles. I don't know what made me stop. I wasn't looking for one. I wasn't spiritual. I didn't know anything about cleansing rituals or how sage is traditionally used. For some reason, I just bought it. Here's a rule, okay? If you ever feel compelled to buy something, especially having to do with like the spiritual world or certain beliefs, if you feel like it's out of your control, best thing to do is to just avoid it. Almost like I had no control over the entire interaction and purchase. Yeah, huge red flag. That evening, I lit the sage and walked around my house, waving the smoke through the rooms without really knowing what I was doing. We cannot be playing around in this stuff, you guys. We cannot be playing around in this stuff. I didn't say any prayers. I didn't set any intentions. I just thought it smelled nice and figured it couldn't hurt. That night changed everything. I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when I started hearing voices. They weren't loud enough to understand, just whispers, almost like people were having conversations somewhere inside my house, just outside of me being able to understand what was being said. So I sat up and listened. And then suddenly, knock, knock, knock. I'm out. Who's there? I don't want to know. 3 loud and heavy knocks echoed throughout the house. It sounded like someone was hitting the house itself with all their strength. The sound was so violent, it made me jump out of bed. My heart was racing, and before I could even process what I'd heard, I heard my oldest son choking in his bedroom. I ran down the hallway in complete panic, terrified that something had happened. But when I burst into his room, he was fast asleep, peacefully breathing. Nothing was wrong. It didn't even look like he had moved at all since he had gone to bed. I stood there frozen, trying to gather my thoughts and figure out what the hell was happening. Then I heard movement from my middle son's room. I rushed in that direction, and what I saw, I still wish wasn't true. It looked like something invisible was lifting his little body up, straight off of his mattress. Just for a second, some unseen hands were carrying him, and then he was set back down. I don't even know how I would react to this sort of thing happening, because I immediately ran to pick him up and laid him back down properly, terrified and shaking. I didn't know what I had just witnessed. I didn't know what was happening inside my house, and I barely made it back into the hallway before hearing something else. Children laughing. Okay, all right, I'm good. I'm done. Children laughing, tiny footsteps, little girls running up and down the hallway. Creepy children, ghost children. That is the scariest thing to me, okay? I can hear like a lady cackling, I can hear like a man speaking to me, anything. If it is a giggle and it is a child, get me out. Little girls running up and down the hallway, back and forth, surrounding me and echoing through the house. I don't have daughters. The entire night felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. It was completely unexplainable and all happened so fast, almost on purpose, like it wanted to disorient me. Whatever was there wanted to make me think I was going crazy or leave me with enough doubt that I'd act like it hadn't actually happened. When I finally made it back to my bedroom, I didn't sleep at all for the rest of the night. Girl! Next morning, I called my aunt and begged her to come over. I told her everything. She blessed the house while I played gospel music as loudly as I could, filling every room with it. And after that, for a while, everything seemed normal again. Weeks passed without me experiencing anything. I started convincing myself that maybe pregnancy hormones were at play, or stress, even exhaustion had caused me to believe everything I'd experienced. Then one afternoon, I got incredibly sick. Out of nowhere, I could barely move. My body felt heavy. I was so weak, like all my energy was actively being sucked out of me. I was sitting in my bedroom trying to rest when it happened. Across the room, my closet door slowly creaked open. There wasn't a draft, no AC kicking on, no one else was home. It just slowly swung open, almost like someone inside was carefully pulling it open from the other side. I stared at it for maybe 2 seconds before I felt this intense urge to get the hell out of there. I have never moved so fast in my life. I grabbed my keys, ran out of the house, and stayed outside until my boyfriend and kids came home. And that was years ago. But the strange feelings never really stopped. To this day, sometimes late at night when I'm lying in bed, I feel something touch my legs. The lightest brush or caress across my skin. Sometimes I feel pressure on my pillow, almost like someone is leaning against it beside me while I sleep. At this point, I've learned to ignore it. I don't open my eyes, I don't react. I don't want to see what's been standing beside my bed all this time. And sometimes I find myself wondering if that random bundle of sage was supposed to cleanse my home or invite something in.
I saw my sister standing in my room, except for she wasn't even home. I woke up around 2 a.m. and immediately realized I couldn't move. Standing beside my dresser was my younger sister. She wasn't saying anything to me, just staring at me. The weird part was her smile. It didn't look right. It looked forced, like somebody pretending to know how to smile. I kept trying to call her name, but couldn't speak. Then she started walking toward my bed, very slowly. The closer she got, the more wrong she looked. Her eyes looked too dark. Her arms seemed too long. Then she leaned over me and whispered, "She's not home." I immediately snapped out of the paralysis. I grabbed my phone and called my sister. She answered on the first ring. She was 2 hours away staying with her friends. She hadn't been home all weekend.
So listen to me, listen to me. So listen to me, listen to me.
Last night I was scrolling when I came across this video. Now, I went down the rabbit hole and it instantly filled me with immense dread because not only did this woman disappear without a trace in the Ugandan wilderness, but her clothes were found days later, torn and wrapped tightly around tree branches not far from where she went missing. Despite a ton of evidence suggesting that she was murdered, like her underwear being hung up in a tree, authorities say this must all be just one tragic accident. This case deserves so much more attention than what it's gotten because, to many, something really sinister happened to this woman. And since this is still unsolved, let's talk about it. This is Sophia Coetzee. She was only 21 years old when she suddenly and very mysteriously disappeared in Uganda's Murchison Falls National Park in 2015. Sophia was born and raised in Amsterdam, and she was described as an extrovert who was curious, charismatic, extremely reliable, and had such a captivating personality. She was also a really talented pianist, but what she was really interested in was medicine. She studied medicine in Amsterdam, but her goal was to specialize in tropical medicine, which is a branch of healthcare that focuses on preventing, diagnosing, and treating diseases that are unique to hot, humid, and tropical regions of the world. So in 2015, when she got accepted into an 8-week internship at Lubaga Hospital in Kampala, which is the largest city in Uganda, she was over the top excited. This was like a dream come true for her, and it was kind of a much needed boost of confidence. While studying medicine prior to this, Sophia was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, so she didn't always have an easy time navigating life. But at this point in time, as she was about to fly out for this amazing opportunity, Sophia had her mental health seemingly under control. She hadn't experienced any episodes and overall was just in a good frame of mind. So during that entire 8 weeks of internship, Sophia became super close to the other medical students there and the hospital staff. She always showed up on time and was soaking up their culture and learning their way of life. She helped assist routine surgeries and delivered babies, and honestly, it was the best time of her life. She would call home to her mom and tell her how much she loved it there and how much she was learning. So when the internship came to an end, it wasn't a surprise that she didn't want to leave. Instead, she and 2 of her friends / other students there joined a small tour through the Ugandan wilderness that was supposed to last 2 weeks. And when I say small, I mean it. It was literally Sophia, her 2 girlfriends, and their tour guide, whose name was Michael. More on him later. Sophia's parents were really happy for her to explore and have fun, but they were also a little bit worried. Like I said, she had bipolar disorder, and sometimes when she didn't get enough sleep, it would send her into a spiral. She seemed to be okay during her entire 8-week internship, but once the 2-week tour started, her mental health seemed to decline. At least to her friends traveling with her, it seemed like she was experiencing symptoms of mania. Sometimes they would catch her talking to herself, and at one point she tried to get out of a moving car, but still they pushed forward hoping that she would be okay. But on the second day of the trip, her friends woke up to find Sophia missing. She eventually turned up, and she told her friends she'd spent a good portion of the night in a lookout tower in the wildlife park that they had been staying in. When asked why she did this because it seemed a little bit scary, Sophia told her friends that she just wanted to test herself to see if she could survive one night out in the wilderness all by herself. She seemed in great spirits, but that same night, she called a friend back home in Amsterdam and told them that she wasn't getting a lot of sleep and that she was really overstimulated. She said she just wanted to be alone. On the 5th day of the trip, all 3 of the women and their tour guide traveled to Uganda's Murchison Falls National Park. They were all super excited to take a boat trip along the Nile River. At one point when they docked, Sophia walked away for a quick bathroom trip, but she didn't immediately come back. This worried her friends, so they took off looking for her. And eventually, they found her in the woods talking to a mom and her child. They asked Sophia if she was coming back with them because they were going to continue on with their trip, but Sophia said no and initially refused to come with them. She seemed way more interested in talking with this random woman, and it actually ended up causing a disagreement with her and her friends. Her friends were just trying to get back to the boat and tour guide, and they were also trying to help protect Sophia, but her behavior seemed more and more manic. This brings us to October 28th, 2015, the 6th day of the trip. Now, Sophia's friends were becoming so concerned with her behavior that they actually wanted to end their travels together early and call Sophia's mom to let her know what was happening. All day on the boat, Sophia was acting strange and fiddling with all the equipment on board, and she also spent a lot of time in the bathroom by herself. Sophia said that she had an upset stomach, but some people think that she just needed a place to be alone. I mean, she was feeling overstimulated, and with her diagnosis, maybe she just needed some time to herself. And the bathroom was really the only spot where you could truly be alone. So at around 6 p.m., the group docks and they make their way to the student center for the Uganda Wildlife Authority in the national park. It's a deeply wooded area that's home to a few dedicated cabins for the students. This is about a third of a mile from the Nile River, which eventually flows into Lake Albert. The last time Sophia was ever seen was near the camp's bathroom about 30 minutes later, so around 6:30 p.m. She was carrying a plastic water bottle that she used to store all of her garbage, and she was looking in the direction of the river. This was right before nightfall, and as Sophia walked to the bathroom, her friend stayed behind and decided to actually call her mom. The whole point was to tell her mom that they were going to end their travels early because of Sophia's behavior, and they were really concerned. It was a sticky situation because this would more than likely upset Sophia, but they just didn't know what to do. The friends had already tried to warn their tour guide that they should just turn around and go back home instead of going deeper into the Murchison Falls National Park, but he didn't listen to them. As they were on the phone with her mom, Michael, the tour guide, approached them and said, quote, "Have you seen Sophia?" End quote. At this point, Sophia never came back from the bathroom, so they set off looking for her. And when they couldn't find her, they notified authorities. Literally within 15 minutes, Ugandan police and park rangers were on the scene looking for her, but it was like she vanished into thin air. At around 8 p.m., they had to call off the search for the night because it was too dark and dangerous, but it resumed at 9 the next morning. This is when they found their first clue. About 600 yards away from the campsite, police found Sophia's water bottle that she kept trash in floating in the Nile River. But still, no sign of Sophia herself. This is when the investigation ramped up and the search got huge. It involved helicopters, search dogs, multiple police officers and park rangers, and authorities even used drones to try and find Sophia. But it turned up nothing. Then, the next day, so now 2 days after Sophia vanished, police discovered something incredibly disturbing. Just a few yards away from where her water bottle was found, police found even more of her personal belongings scattered across the riverbank. This included her purse in good condition, her Ray-Ban sunglasses, her right shoe, which was perfectly clean, and the sole of her left shoe. The most disturbing thing found, though, was pieces of her clothing, which had been mysteriously torn and tied onto tree branches. Like, it kind of looks like this had to have been done by a human with how tightly her ripped clothes were wrapped around these branches. And it just keeps getting worse. About 16 feet up in the air, wrapped around a tree branch, was Sophia's underwear. What's super weird to me is that these belongings were found almost in the exact same place as where her water bottle was found the day prior. So how did the police miss this discovery? It was about a 15-minute walk from her campsite where she was last seen, and all of her belongings were in good condition, despite them being out in the open for several days. When asked why they didn't find these items sooner, Ugandan police said it was because it was raining really bad the night before, so they must have been underwater. But again, despite it being rainy and super muddy, her belongings were eerily clean. And that doesn't even account for her underwear, which they obviously were not underwater because they were really high up in a tree. So right off the bat, none of this made any sense, and Sophia's parents flew in to investigate themselves, along with Dutch authorities. All of this disturbing evidence was found, yet Sophia was still missing, and time was of the essence. Right away, Dutch investigators said it looked as though the scene had been manipulated and staged, and with her belongings not being found sooner, it really led them to question whether or not they'd been planted overnight. It's been reported that Ugandan police possibly lied about certain evidence that was found, and possibly even sightings of Sophia, maybe in an effort to cover up if a crime was actually committed. It really seemed like they just didn't want to investigate Sophia's disappearance, and they kind of used her bipolar diagnosis as an excuse to not pursue any leads. In my many years of researching true crime cases, I've sadly seen this happen way too many times. When someone goes missing and they have a mental health background like Sophia, people immediately almost tune out, and they use that as an excuse to not really take the case seriously. It's infuriating. So since this case wasn't really given much effort, Ugandan police came to a quick theory and possible explanation. They feel one of two things happened. Either Sophia was attacked by a wild animal, which is possible since the Nile River houses some dangerous animals like crocodiles and hippos, and the forest is home to wildlife like leopards, lions, elephants, elephants and buffaloes. That's the number one theory that they tried to push, that she was attacked and killed by a wild animal. But almost no evidence supports this. There wasn't any blood anywhere, even on her ripped clothes, and there weren't any drag marks in the mud either. Nobody heard any screams, and this theory also doesn't account for why her clothes were carefully and deliberately torn and tied really tightly around tree branches, or why her underwear was up in a tree. The second theory that Ugandan police tried to push was that, again, maybe she was attacked by a wild animal and then taken into the Nile River, where she drowned, or that maybe she just tried to go for a swim and then, again, accidentally drowned. But that also doesn't explain the disturbing way that her clothes were found. And according to an expert and local who knows this area like the back of his hand, he says that it would have been extremely difficult for Sophia to have found the actual path to the river by herself. Not only was it pretty dark when she disappeared, but this was also her very first time in this location. It's kind of a hidden path to the river, and it's not easy to find. So with the evidence that was left behind, Sophia's parents and Dutch investigators believe something way more sinister happened. They decided to conduct a more thorough investigation themselves, and what they found is horrifying. So Dutch authorities sent all of the evidence, aka Sophia's clothes at the crime scene, to an independent forensic lab in the Netherlands. That team analyzed her clothes, and they found something alarming. A massive amount of unknown male DNA, which did not match to any of the Ugandan police working the case or to any members of the search party. Their evidence suggests at least one unknown male, but likely more, left their DNA on her clothing, and specifically her underwear. And just based on the sheer amount of DNA left behind, it has led their team to conclude that Sophia's disappearance was not self-inflicted, it was not an accident, and it wasn't the result of an animal attack. To them, it seemed clear that an animal was responsible, just the kind with 2 legs and not 4, if you know what I mean. Then, even more disturbing evidence was found backing up the theory that foul play was possibly involved. So Michael, the women's tour guide, was actually not licensed at all. He didn't have the proper training or certifications to legally give tours, and authorities warned him to stop giving tours right before Sophia disappeared. Not to mention, he supposedly took the girls to an unsafe part of the forest and against authority instructions. Sophia's friends told him that something was really wrong with her and to turn around and go back home. But he didn't. It got to the point where Michael was almost held criminally responsible for Sophia's disappearance, but the case was dropped. This all seems really sketchy to me, and I can't find if police ever tested his DNA to what was found on Sophia's underwear or not, but I really hope they did. Some locals believe that police know exactly what happened to Sophia and who was responsible, but as of today, nobody really knows what happened to Sophia. Her body has never been found, and her case remains unsolved. But over the years, there have been a few theories as to what could have happened. Theory number 1 is animal attack, which I personally don't believe just based off the evidence that we do have. Like for starters, the unknown male DNA left behind on her clothes. That obviously does not belong to an animal. Theory number 2 is that she wandered off, maybe in a manic state and not really knowing her surroundings, and then she got lost and either drowned or succumbed to the elements. A lot of people think this is a real possibility since just a few days prior, she stayed overnight by herself in a lookout tower to see if she could survive on her own. Maybe she tried again this time and then just accidentally died and has just never been found. This still doesn't explain why her clothes were found the way they were though. Although I do acknowledge that if her mental state was deteriorating, that all sorts of things could have happened without a logical explanation. The last and most sinister theory is that foul play was involved. I mean, Sophia did disappear in the vicinity of a pathway that led to a local settlement where people lived. So it's not really unrealistic that she ran into another person out there in the woods. And just based on the male DNA left behind on her clothes, which suggests more than one man left it, I can't shake the feeling that something horrible happened to her out there. It's incredibly scary to me that she vanished off the face of the earth within 15 minutes. I don't know what happened to her, but it's just really sad to see how badly this case was botched. Ugandan police didn't even interview potential suspects or witnesses that could have seen something. But what do you guys think happened? Sophia's family went on to create this website called findsophia.org, where they continuously update the case, and they write about how her disappearance has shattered them, how the not knowing is worse than knowing. But it's now been 11 years, yet whatever really happened to Sophia out there in the wilderness remains a mystery.